everyone. We're just waiting for the speaker, and we should be starting in a couple of minutes. Hi, Shan. I can see on the chat that you are here. If you can show yourself. Okay, Cheryl. Thank you. Good that you're here.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Cheryl. Nice to see you.
Nice to
yes, we haven't seen each other. Hey, so we've got this exciting session around open banking next, and we're just waiting for Sean, the speaker.
That is correct. So I'm actually chatting with him. He was around 2 o'clock. He did send me a message because he was looking out for the room and he couldn't find it. So let me just let him know that we are waiting for him. Yeah, just give me a minute.
Yeah. So what I can do is I can just sort of introduce NGINX. I just as an overview whilst we wait for Sean. So what to say about NGINX? Well, key sponsor and also part of the F5 network since November last year, I believe.
Well, since May of last year, actually.
May, was it? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks. My research failed me then. Huh.
No worries, it's fine. Yeah, so the acquisition actually was completed in May. Obviously, due diligence had to be made upon announcement back in March, and then it took a few months to do the due diligence, which is typical of any big company acquiring another company. And yeah, and everything was actually went very smoothly. The way it was handled, and yeah, it was one of those very quick and very a smooth transition, right? So NGINX now is a business unit of F5. And essentially the acquisition was really about F5 building up their portfolio of products where they are very traditional in the sense that their target audience has always been the infrastructure people, the NetOps people, right?
Yeah.
So and obviously with the application economy being this popular now, they had to find a way to be able to continue that journey, and that is what the acquisition is all about, to be able to have an end-to-end solution. And here we go. We have Sean on the call.
Hey, Sean. Nice to see you. Okay, while you get ready, yeah. So yesterday we heard, well, to take on from that topic, we see that NetOps and DevOps are merging, and yesterday we heard all about from Laurent migration of microservices, right? You know, where to start, how to go about it. Today's going to be a talk by Sean, who's just joined us, who's the Principal Security Advisor for F5 Labs, with a keen interest in financial services malware security, and consulting on this for over a decade as a Principal Security Advisor. So we'll be talking about open banking and what we need to know about that and how it all works. Well, how part of it works at least. And so, Sean, how are you going to do this? Do you have a presentation? Do you have a slide deck? How can we get conversation going with our audience?
Yes. So thank you, Jonathan, and thanks for the patience. I am still struggling with a few stuff, like hearing my own echo right now.
It's okay from this side. We can hear a bit of the echo, but it's manageable from this side.
Yeah, and also for some reason my screen share would not start. So just bear with me for a second. So there's an icon with screen share logo. I select the screen and
just the gear icon. Yeah. Sorry, not the gear icon, the screen share.
The
icon.
one next to it.
Yeah, the one with the red line through it. Yeah. So I guess the topic, I'll just carry on talking for a bit. So the topic this afternoon will be all about open banking at API Days. So I think this session here will be focused on more the security aspects and how to consume the APIs. So Sean, if it's not working, perhaps you could give us some background on how you see NGINX F5 working together, and what the security issues might be.
Yeah. So I wanted to start with a very simple thought process of what's happening in the industry right now and how we are seeing things changing with respect to banking and how people approach banking in general. So that's why I thought it's a very cool discussion topic that we can bring in, taking the day-to-day stuff or the mundane stuff that we used to do with respect to managing our money or going to the banks, and how it has been completely revolutionized by all these apps that are coming along, right? So think about it like you are on your most favorite social media application, and you can do a financial transfer from there. Or you are in one app and you want to say pass money to some other app, so you can share data across the apps, which is really revolutionizing the way people see the applications and how they are interacting with it, right? So even though we don't have slides, we have really cool, interesting points that we can talk about. I'm just gonna hope that this starts showing my screen. Just give me one last second, one more try. Otherwise, we will just carry it without the slides, because we have tons of interesting questions and data points that we want to share with you.
I think everyone's really
Yeah, I'm just gonna give it up and let's just go ahead without the slides.
I'm sure you know enough.
Yeah.
Just lay it on us, right? And then we'll grill you hard on that. Yeah.
That would be cool. So let us start with a few interesting points, right? Like I wanted to cover a few interesting stuff about the open banking space itself. The first thing that we would like to understand is the open banking, the why and what. I think it's been done to dust that everyone understands the why and what. Then we'll look at the API landscape. Then we'll try to look at the actors, how technology is playing in this space, and security and compliance. So just a quick overview, right? I'm giving some numbers, which is with respect to what we see in Asia Pacific, not only in Singapore, right? So there is a challenge that the financial sector itself is facing, or people themselves are facing. And the number one challenge that we see is the unbanked customers in Asia Pacific. So if you look at pure numbers, 73% of people in Southeast Asia and 58% of people in South Asia are not in the banking system, which is a huge number. And we need to bring those people to the banking system as well. If we look at the attach rate of financial services, uh, we see in emerging economies, a person interacts with a bank for a single service. But in a developed market, a person can interact to bank as much as 3 or 4 services, which makes his interaction even more meaningful. And he has a lot of data with the bank as well. We have underserved small and medium businesses, and there is constant pressure on banks to actually improve business, to improve profitability. So those are some of the key challenges that banks have been facing in the region. So the next, I would also like to cover the important aspect of the banking system, which is not the technology or the banking system. It's the consumer or the end users. The whole profile of end users as we know it has been changing. If you take me or you yourself as an example of a normal user, we have realized that the way we interact with things have changed. We are willing to give up data to get more personalized services. So a survey done by F5 shows that 6 out of 10 people are willing to give their personal information just to get more meaningful information or more meaningful service from the bank, right? Another interesting aspect is every one of us handles a smartphone these days. Now, this phone is also allowing us to do a lot of good stuff, and we can do all the transactions from our device as well. So we've seen the banking space is changing, the consumer is changing, right? So what is the bank trying to do to actually evaluate this? So we can just look at few cases like what are the use cases that we have, right? So as we know, in Asia Pacific itself, we have a lot of regulation and guidance coming from a lot of different places to actually enable the open banking practice. So it came in Australia in the form of CDR or consumer data rights, where the consumers have the right over their own data and who they share with, right? It applies to banking as well as other sectors as well. And local to Singapore, Association of Banks and as well as Monetary Authority of Singapore came together and they published a whole periodic table of APIs. These are APIs that banks and financial services should expose. If you look at these APIs, they cover all grounds. They can come from products, sales, servicing, marketing, reporting, and the most favorite one that I know of is payments. So
yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? If you go on the MAS website, you can navigate to the APIs. I think some banks have got like 1,000 APIs. It's just a lot.
So all these APIs, right, are there for a specific reason because everybody is trying to integrate. We are trying to create a more cohesive application. So the whole idea of the banking system is not to become the app most used on your phone because let it be, because banking applications are not the most useful. But the idea that you have an app which you use on a frequent basis, but then when you want to do a transaction from there, it provides you the convenience of staying on the app, but still be able to perform that banking transaction with the guarantee that a bank is taking care of your transaction. That's the whole thing that open banking and this fintech revolution brings to us. So as we said, there are tons of APIs. You can select your products, you can select your services. And in most cases, as what we have seen, regulations as well as guidance is to go step by step. We see people first open read-only APIs where you can read information about products, which are generally available in unauthenticated fashion. Then you move from there and you move to the services and accounts where you can read data which is confidential or tied to the end user. And when everything matures slowly, you will see people moving into the phase 3, which is like doing transactions. So if I take 3 regulations like the CDR, the HKMA policy on open banking, as well as Singapore MAS API playbook, all 3 of them follow the same kind of guidelines. Have an API ecosystem and open APIs slowly in a way which makes you comfortable and which is comfortable to the end users as well.
So what's it like with all this stuff? Is it all ready to go? How is governance maintained or the security of all these APIs?
Yeah. So one of the key imperative of having a successful open banking initiative is to have a security model. And another one that I would say is equally important is to have an API architecture or ecosystem architecture and API lifecycle in place. With these two things in place, we will be able to put and provision an entire governance model across this. What APIs are you pushing? What kind of data is this API supposed to access? If it's showing PII or confidential data, what kind of security are we having on it? What kind of monitoring process are we having on it? If somebody from a known partner gets compromised and he or she or that organization just tries to pull down all the data from our system, will we be alerted of it because it's a trusted channel, but it is not acting in a trusted manner? So the compliance that is all in place that applies to the banking still applies to open banking as well. Just because you're an open banking API does not mean that all the regulations goes away. All the regulation that a normal bank has to follow is there in place. And in addition to that, we have this extra guidance that will help us protect against it.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about some of the regulations subsequently.
So Sean, sorry to interrupt. Don't mean to interrupt. I'm just thinking of timing, right? There's only like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, you painted this picture of, thanks for the introduction, of open APIs, that it's a new way to people who are unbanked, and that there are issues that relate to conventional banking and this open banking. So what's it like? I mean, is it just a matter of consuming these APIs? You know, how does F5 come into this? What's the story?
Okay, so before we just go into what F5 positions its solution is, right? We have to understand that the open banking ecosystem is a 3-party or a 4-party ecosystem, and the core actors are A, the consumers, which are the people like you and me. B, you have the data holders, which is basically the banks who hold the data for it. And then you have data recipients, like the fintech vendors. And then there is a registrar, like the MAS. So MAS creates this relationship between the data holders, the banks, and the fintechs. But it does not mean that if there is a relationship between a bank and fintech, they are allowed to give all the consumer data directly to the recipients or to the fintech. The beauty of open banking it is always user initiated. A bank may have a relationship with a fintech, but only when a user consents that you can share my data to this fintech recipient, only then this information goes ahead to the fintech partner. A bank may have 2 users, one user does not allow, one user allow. So we need to have that kind of granularity. And this can only be possible if there is a robust technological solution in place. We can have all the good APIs at one place. We need to cover these APIs with a good solid platform that has the capability to understand how to do consent for these users, how to do authentication for these users and the data recipients as well, and how to do impose things like trade limits, or also validate if there is something good or bad that is actually flowing in between these partners. So one simple way of thinking about it is to have or position an API gateway in front of the APIs that open banking systems are exposing. And that is where F5 as a solution comes into place. So traditionally, API gateways have been a place where what you do is you put in a gateway and you request to offload certain critical functionalities on the gateway. Things like TLS termination or SSL termination, client authentication, request routing, etc., etc. It does a lot of awesome job sitting in front of these APIs and just lets the developer focus on the core part, like building the business logic. So that's where our NGINX API gateway comes into a picture. It can be positioned over there, and it can be sitting in any form factor. We have seen banks across Asia Pacific in different level of maturity with respect to their data centers. Some banks, so if you are in Australia, if you know that CDR was implemented in all, like the 4 major banks had to open up all the APIs by early this year itself. So if you have a bank which is running virtualized machines, or if you have a bank that says, okay, I will use my existing APIs and I'll open it up in a proper secure manner, we have a gateway that can suit any of the form factors. It can sit in a physical machine or as a software. It can sit as a virtual machine, or it can even sit within a container inside a Kubernetes cluster. And that's how we provide value to these APIs that organizations are trying to expose. Next, as we said, right, one of the key factor for securing all these things is to have a secure security gateway, dedicated security device that can sit in front of your gateways and eliminate bad traffic. So with APIs, what happens is you have a lot of endpoints, and you don't want to expose all these endpoints, right? That's why you put a single gateway as an endpoint in front of it. But then you have bad actors who will try to put in stuff like injection attacks or the run-of-the-mill OWASP API top 10 attacks, or you have bots doing DDoS attacks or things trying to scrape your system. This is where a dedicated gateway from a dedicated solution like the F5 Advanced Web Application Firewall or the F5 Application Programming Management, they sit in front of this API gateway and secure all the APIs that are running within the system. So that's the F5's play. We can provide a two-tier architecture which can take care of your containerized application or your application on a virtual machine, provide a performant API gateway, and secure this and do a heavy lifting of security with a first frontier or an edge gateway that is security heavy.
Great. So that's an overview about the endpoints, the different ways in which to bring in these APIs. There's a question here around the ABS, right? So the ABS is Singapore specific, Association of Banks Singapore, and they're very good at guidelines, all right? I'm not sure if you, don't expect you to have read the playbook, but would this be a good place to start? And would there be a mapping between this, the API providers, the security F5? How would one work in the Singapore context, for example?
So for Singapore context, ABS or the ABS MAS API playbook is a very good starting point for people who don't understand what are the APIs, and if there is an API, what's the security construct with respect to an API. The security is just not one thing, saying that I will just do rate limiting or I will just do DDoS protection. That's only just one aspect of security. It covers a lot. Understanding the requirement of storage for a particular data set, understanding the requirement for SSL encryption or TLS encryption that is mandatory for a data set. Authentication, what would you support? Do you only support OAuth, JOT tokens, or you want to support SAML as well? Because some APIs might require varying degrees of authentication factor that you need. So the MAS API playbook actually breaks it down into all these categories. They take individual API and explain in detail what these APIs need to be covering and what security needs to be covering from them. So that's a good starting point. In addition to that, we can also look into other regulations. So MAS API playbook is not a regulation, it's a playbook. We can look at, draw some more conclusions, some more regulation side of stuff, like CDR is a regulation. Over there also, so if you look and try to compare, there is a whole lot of commonalities between all these regulations that we see. So HKMA, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, has a regulation, CDR has a regulation. And we see things like, okay, security, authentication control, what would you recommend? There will be things like MTLS, credential, multi-factor authentication, X509 certificate, OIDC, common across most of them. Authorization and consent management de facto for all APIs is OAuth 2.0. Okay. For transaction security, we are seeing things like FAPI or finance grade APIs coming in picture. Yeah.
Sounds like there's a and for what you've just said, the ABS and similar are a starting point for people who want to find out more, but it's going to be highly individualized, right, for the use case. Actually, we're coming to the top of the round table, but we started late, so if people want to stay, we can continue. Was there anything else that you had to say on this? There seems to be a lot.
So as you say, talked about this, right? Like a lot of people think that like if you are exposing this API, does it actually mean that what happens to your existing security standard? So if I'm doing authentication control, authorization consent management, transaction security based on what the new guidelines is, does it mean that the standards, other security standards like ISO 27001 2013 that I was supposed to comply with as a banking, does it come out of the system? The answer is no, because if you look at CDR, or even if you look at European Union's payment service directive PSD2, it always says that you will have to comply to all the native banking regulations that is there in place. So things like the compliance, PCI, DSS, ISO, and all the ISO standards are valid and relevant. So that is there given. But on top of it, you will have to cover your APIs with the API security stuff or security that concerns your API, like your MTLS, like your 509 certificate, like your JOT tokens, or 2.0. Very mandatory and needs to be positioned in place. And I would like to just take one more minute and talk about one interesting use case, like what we saw. This does not exactly come from a fintech side of the point of view, but it comes from a shared open data kind of ecosystem. So we have been working with an organization where we found that they had open APIs and these APIs were exposed out. And we saw that a partner was actually trying to make requests to these APIs, which is a legitimate thing to do. Your partner has been cleared. So you have your MTLS relationship between the partner and the API provider. But what we saw that this particular partner, somehow one of the machines got compromised, and this legitimate channel then was used to dump all the traffic, all the data from the server. So that's why it is also important to understand saying that only one vertical or focusing on one vertical is not enough. Just saying that I am authenticating somebody is not enough. Your security is built in layers. Authentication, rate limits, etc., helps you build a secure ecosystem with different with all the different partners that you have in place.
What about protecting the endpoints from a surge of calls? Was that a particular use case? Okay.
Yes, in this particular case, we saw it's not an endpoint. It's a partner network which was authenticated to call another provider's network. And since the networks were trusted, authentication went through successfully. But since there was no rate limit imposed, they were able to pull down the data at a heavier rate, which they should not be able to. It should have raised alarm bells saying that something is not right, because usually this guy pulls out data for 5 or 10 people, but right now he's trying to download the entire database.
Okay, so there wasn't
that kind of analytics.
So there was somehow compliance governance missing from that particular API process.
Yes.
Wow.
So there was. So since there are a lot of places, there is no regulation, and it's more like a guidance. If it's a regulation, it's a punishable offense if things like this is missing. But since it's only a guidance, we saw. But this was not a Singapore use case. So, but since it's just sharing about the things that we see across the APCJ region.
I see. Okay, well, I mean, the panel is open for discussion. We're at the top of the round table. We could carry on. I don't know if you're okay to carry on for a bit, continue the conversation. So where does we heard yesterday about NGINX and multi-cloud, right? And I think that was more from the aspect of infrastructure and providing the services, right? Microservices. Where would this F5 stack fit into that NGINX offering and also multi-cloud?
Yeah. So the entire F5 offering, right? So be it F5 native products like the Big IP, which is a physical appliance or a virtualized appliance, or be it the NGINX suite of products, which can be software as well as containerized based, or be it our managed services like Shape, which protects against bots. The entire service suite is aimed and geared towards a simple thing. We are into the business of application delivery and application security, right? So if you have an API, if you want to make it a performant API, you can definitely position an API gateway in front of it. The lightweight nature of the NGINX API gateway, which actually decouples the control plane from the actual gateway plane, makes it even more performant in nature. And you can spin it up at a lightning fast speed because it can be both containerized and virtual machines. So that's how we integrate into pipelines and even different deployment aspects to provide these kind of services to any organization. And then we do have things like bot defense, which is very important because bot defense for APIs is still like quite debated, because in most cases bot defense is based using JavaScript, and the moment you bring API into discussion, APIs can be consumed from any device, and a JavaScript would actually break. So understanding these factors is important for securing APIs. So we'll have to tune our solution accordingly.
Right. So thanks for that. I think you've given quite a few examples in considerable detail on what it takes to consume APIs. It's not always as simple, and it seems the risks are always emerging as well. And there's a range of deployments from hardware to software.
Yeah.
Okay. Just looking at the time and respecting that there are other tracks, including Open Banking track, I will just refer to the chat, where there's a few links to documents which can support this, and the chat will be around once we finish this. So how else can people contact yourself, Sean? And
So I will drop my contact in the chat as well. And we do have published a lot of good, decent work on open banking as well as API security. We'll paste in some links for those studies as well.
Great.
In the chat window.
Yeah, there's plenty happening in the chat window. All right. So I think in the interest of time, to respect the next tracks which are coming up. Oh, actually, it's a break next. All right, so we can carry on talking. But just to respect people's time, thanks very much, Sean, for this introduction on demystifying.
Yeah. I appreciate your time as well, Jonathan. And apologies, I am not sure. I tested the system 2 days ago, but we decided to play Murphy's Laws on me today.
Well, it's great. It's great that you're here and you've sort of covered a lot. So I hope that was useful to the audience. Thanks everyone for attending. And everyone's plenty of information in the chat. And if you want to carry on chatting there's plenty of opportunity. So have a good break. And thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.